Dads.
All right, I got a couple more spooky stories for you since we're in the throes of spooky season.
Of course, it
Um,
is the middle of spooky season.
It is. We all know it. You can feel it in your bones.
Hold on, before you tell your
First
scary
thing-
stories, I'm gonna lighten the mood, and then you can take it terrible. I found somebody on TikTok who pretends to be a 1600s pilgrim, and she goes on there saying, "I don't know why people are accusing me of witchcraft. I never have done witchcraft. I don't even know." And she just pretends to be a 1600s pilgrim woman. And it's very funny. It's a very good bit.
That's funny.
It's just one of those very niche things that, like, if I told Katie is the perfect place for me to bounce humor against because she thinks nothing is funny. She has a terrible sense of humor. She just nothing is funny to her. So if I tell her something like I found this, she'd be like, "That's so weird." And this one, yes.
Yeah.
If I tell you about it, it's weird, but it is some of the best content I've seen. So speaking of spooky season, and that led me to your Salem that you want to go to for Halloween, and that led me to the pilgrim thing. So all
That's
right,
great.
now tell your spooky stories.
All right. Spooky stories. A couple weeks ago, I get a text from Kayla while I'm at work that says, "Hey, the TV's not working. It was working when I left to pick Grayson up from daycare, but it's not working now. Like we had it running, I pick Grayson up from daycare and it's not working." She's like, "I'm turning it off, I'm turning it on, and it's just not turning on." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Well, have you like unplugged it and plugged it back in?" She's like, "Oh, I'll try that." So we're on the way, or I pack up and I head home from work, and I call her. She's like, "Yeah, I've unplugged it from the outlet. There's nothing going on." I was like, "Huh, weird. Okay." So I get home and I start looking at this TV, and again, the TV was working before Kayla went to pick up Grayson for daycare. I go and I look around the TV, and the plug has come unplugged from the TV. Like, not from the outlet. The plug was unplugged from the TV.
That is a hard plug to pull out. Like those things like snap into place when you put them in.
Yeah. So I was like, weird, and I popped it back in and I turned it on and it turned back on. And I asked Kayla. I didn't tell her what happened. I asked her, I said, "Hey, you unplugged it from the wall, right? And plugged it back in." And she said, "Yeah, I did that a couple different times and nothing worked." And I was like, "Huh." I said, "Because the plug was just unplugged from the TV." And she was like, "Don't tell me that. Just stop. Just stop." And I was like, "Well, it's working now. Don't worry about it." So that was the first thing that happened that was kind of weird. Second thing, last weekend, we came home from Jordan and Josh's house, and as we were leaving, I had a 6-pack of beer that had some beer missing, so I grabbed the 6-pack out of the fridge, and I put it in my car. We go home, and I set the 6-pack on the table in our dining room where it sits all night. Okay? It has 3 beers in it and a juice box from Cora because she wanted a juice box.
Sure.
So I put it on the table. We all, end our evening, go to bed. The next morning, in the 6-pack is a bottle of lotion that Kayla has been looking for 2 months. That literally every week she's like, "Man, I wish I could find this lotion. I have no idea where it's at." And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea where it's at. And it is in this 6-pack the next morning, sitting in there. And
Now, are you sure
like,
Cora's not just playing pranks on you? Because this feels like a Cora prank.
I don't think so. And I said, "Oh, you found your lotion." And she said, "Didn't you find it? Did you find it like at the Sanborns? I figured you found it there and put it in the 6-pack." I was like, "Nope. I just grabbed that 6-pack out of the fridge and put it in the car and then set it on this table." So, it's a helpful ghost in one aspect and then a nuisance in the other.
Neither of those things strike fear in me, which is a good thing.
That's good.
On the flip side, tell it to leave you alone. Let me live my life.
If only it were that easy.
Leave me alone. Stop unplugging my TV. Stop taking my lotion, whatever a ghost needs lotion for. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know. Leave me alone. Get out of my life. Tell that thing to buzz off.
I'll try my best.
Terrible.
Terrible. Welcome to Big Dad Energy, the journey of parenting and adulting through the eyes of two young dads. I'm your co-host, Joe Lopez, and with me, as always, is my co-dad, Jared Szymanski. Jared, how the heck are ya?
Joe, Joe, I am what you call a ball of anxiety.
Ball of it. I can
A whole
feel it
ball
off
of it.
you.
I have been a ball of anxiety for today's Friday, since Sunday at 4:00.
Yeah.
Actually, a little bit later because the other game ended later. So like Sunday at like 7:00, I'll say, started, and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. It's permeated my dreams. It's consumed my whole waking day. Joe, the Lions play their first home playoff game in 30 years. In 30 years.
30 years.
I was 5 months old the last time the Lions played a home playoff game. 5 months. It was
That's
January
crazy.
of 94.
Wow.
So, it obviously is going to be an insane. So, to back up even a little bit, the Lions are very good this year. We've talked all season about how good they are. It's been a good season. We've enjoyed it. I mean, it's been fun. It's been great. Some ups and downs in the middle of the season, but so overall pretty good. And they make the playoffs. You feel good about it. You're the 3 seed, so you play the 6 seed, and you're like, the 6 seed can't be that good, right? They're 6 seed.
Can't be that good, but
turns out that 6 seed is your ex.
right. It's insane. What a wild story for the Sunday game.
So it's getting harder and harder not to think that the NFL is scripted. And I say that because last year on a very famous sports podcast, pardon my take, one of the ex-NFL players that work for Barstool made a joke and was like, oh, the NFL is all scripted. You know, they tell you who's going to win and lose each week and how it's going to happen. And you just have to go out and practice how to do it. Blah, blah, blah. Right? You know, like just clearly making a joke. It's a joke podcast. Like that's the whole point.
Right.
News outlets took it and ran with it because news outlets are dumb and don't understand nuance. So it became a big joke. So much of a joke that this season, to kick the season off, when they were advertising like the new NFL season, they had Keegan-Michael Key as the director of the 2024 NFL season sitting at a table read with all of like the popular NFL players like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Dak Prescott, like doing table reads talking about like what's the craziest thing that can happen. And like one of the wide receivers like, I'm going to make a catch without my hands. And like that was like the ad. And that's the joke took off so much that like, oh, the NFL scripted, blah, blah, blah. But let's look at the playoff matchups that at the end of the 2024 season. First off, Lions win their division. Keegan-Michael Key, huge Lions fan. Like one of the biggest Lions fans.
From Detroit.
From Detroit, huge Lions fan. If he's directing this season, he did a good job. Did a good job.
Yeah.
Let's look at all. So, the Cowboys head coach was a longtime head coach of the Green Bay Packers, Super Bowl winner with the Green Bay Packers as the head coach, okay? He gets fired. Goes and coaches the Cowboys afterwards. Green Bay is coming to Dallas Cowboys for the first round of the playoffs.
Poof.
You got Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff. I'm not even going to get into it. You just got to, I mean, the articles that I've read this week are enormous and numerous.
Great.
I mean,
I think it's a game to watch, right? Like it's got to be the game to watch.
So all of these have very varying levels of interest. I think the Lions game, on top of it being this crazy, like your ex versus my ex versus the coach that dumped you versus the quarterback that wanted out to win a Super Bowl to the, you know, all this stuff, right? All of those storylines. On top of it, these teams are almost even in what they can do. Like,
yeah,
Rams, top 5 offense. Lions, top 5 offense. Rams, bottom 15 defense. Lions, bottom 15 defense. Like, they're just very evenly matched at what they can do and what, like, how. So it's not just necessarily the storylines, which are huge, but it's also, there isn't a clear favorite in this game. There isn't like one is significantly better than the other. It's just who's going to play well on Sunday, which then feeds back into the narratives of, is Jared Goff going to be distracted? Is Matthew Stafford going to be distracted? Is it, so it's this whole, so that's the Lions. And then on top of that, for the Chiefs game, you got Tyreek Hill, who left, that got traded out of Kansas City, coming back to Kansas City for the first time. So, like, you look at all of these, like, matchups and homecomings and things like that. It's hard to tell you that this wasn't scripted, because it's
crazy.
The storylines are nuts this year. It's nuts.
It is. And I told you that I've been keeping an eye on the Lions all season, which is really like the first time I've done it.
Yeah.
And I hate that it's taken me 31 years to get into football. But I've been watching Hard Knocks as well. And you have the Dolphins on there. And having the Dolphins versus the Chiefs, I mean, I'm sure there's personalities in every team, right? But the Dolphins, you have Tua, you have Tyreek Hill, and then you have Mike McDaniel, the coach, who is just a hoot.
You love Mike McDaniel? McDaniel?
I love Mike McDaniel.
KD,
he's great.
Obviously, he got popular on TikTok from, like, his catchphrases and things like that. KD started calling him the nerd coach. She's like, the nerd coach. The nerd coach. It's like Mike McDaniel, the coach of the Dolphins. Yeah, the nerd coach. Now she knows him completely and totally. But when she first saw, she's like, did you see that nerd coach on TikTok? I'm like, I saw the nerd coach on actual, sports websites, not necessarily TikTok, for sure.
Yeah, so you got him in Kansas City with Mahomes and Travis Kelce, right? Who are huge personalities in, like, everything, especially since Travis Kelce got famous by dating Taylor Swift. You gotta imagine she's gonna be at that game.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be one heck of a game. What a weekend. And the last hurdle, I think the thing that puts this on the most spotlight, not only the Lions had a great year. If it ends on Sunday, I will be sad. It will be tough. But you look back and you're like, it was a great year. There's some obstacles ahead. Not going to start thinking we're going to lose our offensive coordinator, might lose our defensive coordinator too. A lot of obstacles ahead. But before then, you look at, like, what has happened. There's one more dragon to slay. And the fact that we haven't won a playoff game, not just a home playoff, we haven't won a playoff game since the last home playoff game in 94. That was the last time we won it. So we slayed the dragon. Now we finally hosted a home playoff game for the first time in 30 years. But we still haven't won a playoff game in 30 years. And so, like, you would think home field advantage, first round, get into it. But it's not that way. It's going to be, I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll be back next week with a recap, either good or bad.
I might just run around yelling all week next week if we win. Honestly, I might stop watching football altogether. I might just be done. No, football might not exist for me anymore if the Lions win on Sunday, because I was like, all the demons are slayed. I can retire now. Right. Straight up Thanos, go to my farm and sit down because the work has been done.
Right. It's crazy. And who do the Eagles play? Is it the Buccaneers?
The Buccaneers. So it's a crazy, for our conference, it's a crazy setup where the number one team's a very, very good team, like very favored to win. The number 2 team, Dallas, also a very good team. Number 3 team, the Lions, good team. 4, the Bucs, are barely above 500. Very mediocre, middle of the road team. Decent defense, decent offense. Just played in a really bad division, right? So that's 4, the 4th seed. The 5 seed are the Eagles. And so I'm sorry, Jake, I know you're listening. The Eagles suck right now. They are so bad, Joe. Like, They have Matt Patricia, the old Lions coach, as their defensive coordinator. They can't do it. Their quarterback dislocated his throwing hand finger on this last Sunday, like 5 days ago. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing going right, and the vibes are awful about the team, all this stuff. They're the 5 seed. So arguably the two worst teams in the playoffs are 4 and 5 who are going to play each other. And then you have the Rams and the Packers, who are both top 5 offenses and middle of the road defenses. So like the good teams are 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. And then 4 and 5 are
You're just there.
they're just there, and they're going to play each other. So nobody gets an easy game.
Yeah. Jeez Louise. Jeez Louise. It's
Except for
gonna
the
be
two bad
one-
teams that play against each other. So it's not going to be easy because they're bad playing other bad teams. You know?
Right. Ugh. Yikes. Well, we'll see what happens on Sunday. I'm sure it'll be chaos from your end, chaos on my side. And then we'll come back and we'll reconvene and either be crying or not. We'll
Yeah.
find out.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. So Grayson turns 2 on Sunday. Or on Monday. And that's bananas because he's now
That
a
is
grown ass human.
wild.
Yeah, and he's at this stage now where literally like all the synapses in his brain are firing and he's starting to, string words together to like make sentences or, short sentences and things like that. So it's really fun to watch him start to say more and more things as he's been like the last month. It just seems like things are like kicking in for him and he's starting to realize the words and what means what. So it's so funny. But his thing right now is saying hi. So he'll say, like, you'll be sitting with him and he'll just say, hi, Daddy. He'll say, hi, Grayson. And then, like, a minute later, hi, Daddy. Hey, Grayson. Hi, Daddy. Hey, Grayson. Hey, Willow. and then he'll start going in around. But then he's just in this where he's, like, saying, hi, hi, Mommy. Hi, Daddy. Hi, Cora. But then he's so polite. He's such a kind kid.
That's so nice.
He says thank you. So, like, if you give him, like, yesterday I brought home nuggets and french fries on my way home from work. And he says, thank you, Dad nuggets. Or thank you, Dad french fries. And I'll say, you're welcome, buddy. Whatever it might be. But with that, too, he's also got some big feelings. And last night when he was going to bed, he's no longer a kid that will fall asleep by himself. He's now a kid that needs somebody there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is really tough.
Ben made that switch at the same age when we got him out of the crib and into his bed. I know you guys do beds a little bit earlier than we do, but when he was about 2 because we did it a few months before Will was born. So when we got him out of his crib into his bed, he transitioned into I need somebody to fall asleep in here with me.
Yeah.
So
it's tough. So last night we split up. Kayla was with Cora, I was with Gray, and Gray was just having a hard time, like crying and not wanting me. Kayla started off in the room. Cora wanted Kayla with her, so I, made the switch. But then Grayson just starts yelling, "Mommy cuddle, mommy cuddle," and it's just so sad because he's just like he knows what he wants. He just wants mommy to cuddle him to sleep, and it was so tough. And finally, I got him calmed down. I laid with him. He was quiet. And then, like, after 20 minutes of laying there, he still was awake. He just started crying, and Kayla came in and kicked me out. But it's just funny that now he's finally getting into that point where he's like, yeah, I know what I want. I'm going to say what I want. I know what a sentence is. So he's at a really fun spot. But, yeah, he turns 2 years old.
that's
It's crazy.
wild.
We have 4 kids at every age at this point, right? 4, 3, 2, and 1.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Good God.
First off,
Not
thinking back to where we were when we started this podcast, where we are now is mind blowing.
It's crazy. You didn't even have a kid.
I didn't have a kid, and the personal the personal side of this too is how different my mindset to life is. I think we're going to get into parenting a little bit here in a minute, but to preface it, from where I was before I had a kid, it was really all about work, if I'm being honest. I think you and I have talked, personally about work, but my main focus has always been advancement and going forward and being, the finding the next big thing. I think that leads into how many jobs I've had and why I've jumped.
Right.
And to think back to that mindset to where I am coming up on like a normal end of year review and I'm like, yeah, all right, I can just do this and focus my life and time on everything else because of how like the kids take up so much brain space and emotional, capacity, and how much like
Right.
I think about them and their life so much more than I think about my own life, and how much better that feels. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like just the change in person I was to now who I am is crazy.
Yeah, yeah, we've come a long way. I mean, we've been doing this for 4.5 years. 4.5 years.
That is
We've been making this
insane.
podcast. It does not feel that way at all, but
3.5 years.
it's
That's because
3.5 years.
it doesn't feel like 4.5 years because it's been 3.5 years, but yes.
It's been 3.5 years. When did we start this? 2020? Yeah, that makes more sense. Three and a
Because
half years we've
it's
been making
Ben's
this
age. We
podcast.
started 2 weeks before Ben was born. So
Correct. Yeah. And I was basing it off of Cora's age, which is why, yeah. 3.5 years we've been doing this thing, and it's nuts. Wild. And we've done so many things with it. And we're gonna keep doing things with it. We're at that point now where there's weeks where our kids aren't doing anything new, but then we're also at that point now where their they're changing so much and they have so much in their lives going on, school and daycares and
Mhm.
learning and all that there's just gonna constantly be stuff for us to talk about, which what a wild ride we've had. So with that, I want to talk about our second kids,
Okay.
Grayson and Will. Now I'm gonna say Grayson is the softer, kinder of my two kids. How's that with Will?
The same.
Where's he at?
Uh,
Is he?
so a little bit you and I had talked before about this and touched on it, but like Ben got to decide his own personality. Obviously, he had Cora's the oldest of all the cousins, right? She's the oldest.
Yeah, out of like our immediate like
Mm-hmm.
groups, and then out of like the kids that are in her age group, yeah.
So Ben is not, because Katie's sister's kids are older. But for the most part, because he was born in 2020 and COVID and isolation, all that stuff, he got to develop his own thing and got to be his own person. Like he kind of is. Nobody ever told him to like things, right? Like he just decided he loves trucks and he just decided he likes dinosaurs. Like he just picked those things and we ran with it because even going back, we only ever had like wooden toys. Katie was still is a little bit focused on that, but like was very focused on just wooden toys. So when he found like cars and trucks and things and liked that, we knew that he actually did because he created that, and nobody ever pushed him that direction.
Right.
Switching to Will just does whatever his brother does. Just loves walking around and being with Ben.
Really?
And doing what Ben does. And so like obviously he has his own tendencies and his own like things that he likes to do, but it all stems from what Ben is doing, right? So like
Gotcha.
the other day, it was last night. Will was doing something with Katie in the bathroom, and I was like, "Hey Ben, let's build a train track." So we were building a train track. Will walks to the living room, sits right in the middle of the train track, and starts ripping up train track tiles because that's what we're doing. Like that's who he is as a kid. Is like he just wants to be around and doing what other people are doing. And so it's a little bit, it's good and bad, right? The same thing. He's also, we talked about this, Grayson is too, but they're attachment babies, right? Like, just Velcro babies all over the place. They got to be on you, near you, around you. We're having the hardest time in the world trying to get Will into his own bed because he just, he just can't be alone. Um,
Right.
and so like it's difficult in that facet, right? Where he's kind of a chameleon, but at the same time, he's so sweet and so nice. And I
Yeah.
listen to you talk about Grayson saying thank you and please. Thank you was one of the first like phrases that Will learned. Like you hand him something, he'll
Right.
say thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, and like he's starting to get these like one word phrases, right? And uh,
Right.
like up. He just started to learn up, so now he walks underneath the up, you know, that kind of thing. And like uh but it's cool and interesting to see how he like how those two interact. It's and it's challenging. To be flat honest, it's challenging because Ben wants
Right.
to play by himself. Ben's a strong, independent kid and wants
Right.
to play by himself because that's what he's always done and always likes to do. Like he's never had
Yeah.
to share his train track directions with people. He's never when he drives the
Right.
train around, it's him playing with himself. Now Will wants to be involved and wants to
Mhm.
be a part of it, and it's gonna be challenging. There's gonna be a lot of expanding they're gonna have to do.
Yeah, for sure. Cora's the same way as far as independence. Like she could play by herself, but she also plays with others. But she's also been exposed to a lot more kids than I think your kids have been.
Sure, yeah,
When it comes to kids her age too. So she's kind of always been in the throw of it. Um, so when it comes to, in quotations, parenting your second child, how do you feel like that's been any different than Ben? For example, we both had COVID babies, so we were a little bit more timid to kind of go out a little bit
yeah,
more to kind of bring people into our circle. That's just one example. But like, do you find that like, is it like the typical, you're so overly cautious with the first kid that when it comes to the second kid, you're like, yeah, whatever, they'll chew on that and they'll be fine.
yes,
Like, or
absolutely, yes, absolutely, without fail. Uh, it obviously we still have our rules and boundaries, and we still hold true to all of that. But on the flip side, like you said, Ben was a COVID. We had COVID babies. They were the other side of that, and one that, like, an example most recently I can point to is, um, every time Ben got sick, we took his temperature every 20 minutes, every time. Like,
okay.
what
Yeah.
temperature? What temperature? What temperature? When we were sick before Christmas, and remember, we talked about this in the podcast. He had that Rosella
Yeah.
where his fever was like 104 degrees, 105 degrees, and it was terribly scary. Didn't know what to do. Went to the ER, all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
Nowadays, when the kids are sick, like as long as nobody has a fever that touches 103, all right, you're fine. We'll we'll give you
Yeah.
if you're uncomfortable, we'll give you a little bit of Tylenol, and then we'll figure it out after a little bit of Motrin.
Right.
And that just comes down to like one experience, right? You know what to look for and like what actually is sick and what's not now.
Yeah.
But that's the experience of having a second kid. Like I don't worry and peer and like focus in on Will the same way I used to do with Ben because that Ben was the only one I had to focus on, right?
Yeah.
Disclaimer, of course we make sure our kids are safe. Blah 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 blah. Nobody was injured in this. But that is the lesson that goes along with everything else, right? Is like last night Katie sliced up some apple slices for Ben. Will
Yeah.
is still small enough that like shouldn't really be eating an apple because like he could swallow a piece and choke.
Yeah.
He took a piece off Ben's plate and started eating it, and Katie goes, eating an apple piece? I'm like, yeah, I'm watching him. That never
Yeah.
would have flown with Ben, right? Like
Yeah.
things like that where we used to make sure Ben's food was cut up as little as it needed to be. Used to make sure that like
Yeah.
we've done baby led weaning for both kids where they can just pick whatever food they want to eat kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Used to follow it step by step for Ben and make sure everything was the right size, and Katie had like a little thing that was like, okay, when they're this age it's 1-inch pieces, when they're this age it's half-inch pieces, whatever. We just went with how we felt. Did he eat it? Is he choking on it? No? All right. Let's move
Right.
forward. So in all those senses, we go out more, right? Like last Friday we went to Imperial. Ben had a haircut at 5, so I left work a little early and went to Imperial right beforehand. And like we never would have done that with just Ben, even when you have one
Yeah.
kid. But like it's just so stressful and all this stuff. And now we got there at like 3:50. There was nobody in the restaurant. They gave us a huge boot, one of the big booths against the wall, and
Right.
just let them live. You want to just suck
Yeah.
on chips with guacamole on it? Go for it. Like that's and so all that to say, one, we're more experienced parents, so we know more about our kids
Yeah.
and are more comfortable with it. And two, when it comes to the second one, you got too much to divide your attention on. You just got too much. You can't put as much focus and attention as you did on the first one, and that's just how life is. You only have a certain threshold of that, and when you add a second kid, you run out of it. So
For sure. And I think, we're a lot in the same boat too when it comes to like the food thing. I mean, we still will cut up grapes and things like that, just so he's not inhaling them and choking on them. But for the most part, as far as food goes, yeah, like that stuff, we're just like, yeah, try it, whatever. Now, apples, he doesn't eat apples. He chews them up and spits them on the ground, so Willow can eat them.
nice,
But
nice.
yeah, he likes to think that he likes apples, but I have yet to be convinced that he does.
My Will doesn't
Um,
like raspberries.
oh really?
I don't know why. And it's one of those things that like I kept putting him on his plate and then he'd spit them out and you're like, oh, he's a baby, spitting them out. And Kitty goes, no, he actually just doesn't
Right.
like them. I was like, what? And I watched him like chew it up and make a bad face and then spit it back out. I'm like, oh, this is so.
That's funny.
Ben never disliked anything. Ben just was a garbage disposal. He
That's
just
good.
now, and that's why it's so frustrating as a toddler because like now he doesn't eat, and it's like I know you like it. I know there is nothing you don't
Right.
like, but now he just doesn't eat because he's a toddler and doesn't have time for it. So
Yeah. So when it comes to food, we're in the same boat. Now, when it comes to like playing, I don't know how often you guys like have gone out and gone to parks. Um, but even if it's like in a new environment or um even with his cousins who are bigger than he is, I would say with Cora, we probably were a little bit more hovery, right? Like kind of standing nearby a little bit more, watching a
yeah,
little bit
yep,
closer. With Gray, we still watch, but definitely at a much further distance. Um, but when it came to like parks, we definitely, I feel like, now this may be wrong, but I feel like we let him kind of up on the toys, like up on the jungle gyms and stuff a little bit earlier than we would have with Cora.
sure.
Um, do you feel that kind of the same way with Will as well?
Yeah, I think it has to happen. As weird as that sounds, because of the fact that like Will wants to be where Ben is, right? So
Yeah.
Ben's running by himself on the playset, going up and down the slide because Ben knows how to do it. Like
Yeah.
Ben can climb the monkey bars and do that kind of stuff. Will doesn't even really know how to walk with shoes, right? So like that's the difference in what they're doing.
Right.
But at the same time, he sees Ben up there and goes, I have to get up there. So he tries to climb up the stairs to get up there. And you're like, I just got to make sure you don't hurt yourself. Like that's the role you're
Right.
playing in because like if you don't, I'm just going to hold him and he's going to be fighting me holding him to try and get to where Ben is. And like, it's just none of that is worth it. And so like Ben didn't have that when he was that age, right? We could go swing
Right.
in the baby swings and he'd be totally fine because he's by himself, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I try to take Will to go swing the baby swings, but he sees Ben over there playing on the playset, he wants to be on the playset. Just
Yeah.
that's how they are. So, I think that's part of it. I don't know if that was ever a conscious choice of like letting him be more dangerous. It's just he wants to be where Ben is, and at this point, that's okay as long as I make sure he's not hurting himself. So,
Yeah, for sure. I think with Gray, we're a little bit more on the you'll find out your natural consequences. Like, hey, if you roll off that couch, it's gonna suck.
yeah,
Like,
yep,
and I think with Cora, we did do that, but not as much as we did with Gray. With Gray, kind of like, listen, bud, you're gonna learn if you try to like, get your head on the table, like it's gonna hurt. Like and we'll, do everything to try to stop it. But like, we definitely are a little bit more lenient when it comes to like, the hey, let's get you on a sled and push you down a hill and see how you react to it. Like that kind of situation where with Cora, we probably would have been more timid. One of us would have been on a sled with her or whatever it may be. Um, so I think in our case, that second child, like
Well, yeah.
you always see those, you always see those memes or whatever. It's like the first child like gets a little scratch and is like, crying, and then the
Yep.
second kid like breaks his arm and is just like, I'm fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of that too. The other thing I've noticed is with I don't want to call it less attention, but it definitely is. I guess I just call it that because
Yeah,
Ben got 100%, Will gets 50%. That's how it goes. Uh
yeah,
with less attention, there's less reaction. So like those little bumps and bruises don't get the reaction that Ben got, right? Like
yeah,
Ben used to, I don't know, drop a toy on his toe and cry and need to be held. Will drops a toy
yeah.
on his foot and is like, "Ow," and walks, like walks away.
Right.
Because that's the difference in having one kid versus two kids. It's like Ben's out here being a wild child, yelling, screaming about the house. Will drops a toy in his foot and nobody's gonna go pick him up, so he just moves on. Like
Yeah,
it just
for sure.
that's the difference between the two. I want to ask you a question. Pivoting
Yeah.
to parenting your oldest now that you have a youngest. Obviously, it's different than you can't give them 100%. We already have talked about that. So that's a change for them. What has been the hardest part for you on parenting the difference between your two kids?
I think the hardest part is trying to get Cora to understand that, Grayson needs to be involved in
Yeah.
things. Like, hey, I understand you want to play by yourself, but we also need to teach Grayson how to play with blocks or whatever it might be,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Train tracks,
and
cars. Yes. Lay
right,
out the list.
but right, but on the opposite, also telling Cora Grayson's still too small. He can't do that yet. Like, those are
Yeah.
two totally different things. Like they're completely
Yep.
opposite of each other. But there's the moments, right, where you're like, Cora, he has to play with blocks. Like he's playing with them. Can you teach him how to play with them? But then there's that second piece that's like, Cora, he can't ride a bike yet. Like
Yes.
you can't push him on this thing, or he's not completely stable. He can't jump on a couch like you can jump on a couch. Like,
You can't just roll around and wrestle with him. He doesn't know what that means, like all that kind of
right.
stuff. Yeah.
Thankfully, he's two now, so he can fight back. He can say things. Where Will is still, he's one in
Getting
my
there, but
eyes, a little
not
bit
quite.
more
Yeah.
fragile. Right. Like he's still a little bit fragile when it comes to like rough housing, whatever it may be. Where Grayson, he can throw his own, but he doesn't. He doesn't know that yet. Um, but definitely with Cora, it's like it's always been the sharing, and it probably will always be the sharing, but
Yeah.
making sure that Gray is involved, um, and that like you said it, and we started using it. The like, hey, this is our toy, not your toy, and it doesn't work, but we're trying. Um,
It is tough, and we struggle with it too. After Christmas, you give separate toys. That's like they
yeah,
did get a shared toy. The speaker Tony that I was telling you about last week is a
yeah,
shared toy, and that's easier to be like, I know you want to listen to the Cars one, which has terrible music on it. Will is trying to listen to the Spidey one because he can jump up and down and headbang to it because
yeah,
it's very cute to see him do it. Anyway, but like that same thing is there are cars that Ben got for Christmas that are his cars,
for sure.
but you got to share them. Like I know they're your
Yeah,
cars, but like if we're playing cars together, we got to play together. But then we run into the same thing that Will doesn't really know how to play cars, right? And like
yeah,
he's not big enough to.
totally.
It's not like if it was another kid in Ben's class. It's like, hey, we need to share our toys together. So you play a little bit, they play a little bit. With Ben, it's like, hey, I know Will is grabbing train tracks off the ground that you just put down. That's just his way of playing. Dad will fix, that kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah.
and I've used this phrase before, and I used it to Katie again last night. But like, it's refereeing really right now. It's not even
Yeah.
necessarily like you're just trying to keep peace and do the best you can at making sure each one is happy. Uh, because they're just at such a different age right now that it's hard to align. And the same thing of like Ben's so used to playing alone. You nailed it. You nailed it with that about like you want them to play together, but then when they are playing together, Ben's too big. It's like you're too
Yeah,
big, you're
for
too
sure.
rough. He's like trying to like I'll like bury my face in Will's belly and make him laugh, right? Like that kind of thing. And Ben tries to do it, except he bonks him in the head because Ben doesn't know how to control his
Right.
big old head, and Will's too small and doesn't really like also has it's just it's
Yeah.
wild. Every day's different. I'm at
It
a
is.
loss for words of how many different examples I have of these things because that's just what it is raising kids. This age difference is like they're old and like Will's old and big enough now that he gets involved. He's in it. He walks and
Right.
plays and but he doesn't know what he's doing. And on the flip side, Ben's big enough that like he knows to not hurt his brother, but at the same time doesn't know what he's doing that's hurting his brother because he's just being him. And it's hard. It's very hard.
It is. It is hard. And um yeah, so it's definitely and then there's moments where Cora's very kind and sweet to Grayson, and
Yeah.
they'll share
Yep.
toys, and Cora will be like, "Here, Gray, I got this for you." And Grayson will always get a snack for Cora. If he gets a snack, he'll grab one for her too and give it to her. Um, but definitely, it's that inclusion aspect of like, "Hey, we need to help Gray learn how to play this."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other side of that is well, another piece of that is like, Cora, you are the smartest kid I've ever met that's 4 years old. Like, Grayson doesn't understand the things that you know.
Yeah.
So like you're talking to him like you talk to an adult, which, is fine, but like
It's
he
not
just
her
doesn't
fault.
get
Just
he
like we
doesn't
talked
know
about,
language yet.
she's the
Yeah.
oldest of the oldest. That's like for a long time she was interacting with adults.
Yeah. Yeah, and I said she was the oldest, but she's not. Her cousin Rowan is like 4 months older than her, but
Oh, I
they're
didn't
right
realize
in the
that.
same
Yeah.
they're right in the same line. Um so and then with that too, because of Grayson's age, he's now right in the middle where like he's still not quite big enough to go rip run as fast as hard as he can with Rowan and Cora and Charlie, but he's too big to like
Yeah.
play with baby Calvin. He's right in this weird middle age where there's not really many kids his age to play with. So he wants to go play with the bigger kids. So I have to constantly be like, all right, Cora, Charlie, like, hey, let's keep an eye, we know
Yeah.
you want to play, but let's try to keep an eye on Grayson and be aware of where he's at. So that way you're not knocking him over. You're not, throwing a ball, whatever it might be. Um, is part of that. Like, hey, we need to include him, but
But
he can't play as rough.
yeah, same thing for Will because like the obviously he's the bottom of it, right? He's the youngest. So
Yeah.
he's old enough now that he sees kids playing and wants to play with them, but they're too big for him, right? And the
Yeah.
things are too big for him. And so I mean, he does a good job of just like running around and following them, but at the same time like Katie, we also have a Rowan. One of Katie's friends' son's name is Rowan. Um, and she like went over there the other day when Ben was in school. Last week when she was on break, she went over there when Ben was in school and took Will over. And Will and Rowan are like 4 months apart. She's like, it's so wild to see him interact with a kid his own age and size because he doesn't get that very often.
Yeah.
There aren't really any more kids for Will or yeah, so
Yeah.
because there just aren't, like even Grayson is 6 months older or 8 months older, sorry,
Yeah.
8 months older than Will. So like it's there just really aren't kids Will's age right now. So
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard being the second and the youngest.
just wait till
You're
he's
the
the middle.
second, right?
I'm the
Ugh.
second.
Oh,
And
Grayson,
and I'm a middle.
there's no middle for
No,
Grayson. There's no great middle for Grayson. I'm done.
you're done.
Remember?
You're done. Will
You
might
may
be a
not
middle.
be,
We'll
but
see.
my God.
We'll see. We
Oof.
not anytime soon. We did as we're talking about having a second kid, put it into perspective that this time 2 years ago we were planning on having Will.
Yeah.
And like to think about Will's age and who he is now, and Ben's age and who he is now, and like we're thinking about it, like we wanted to get into this right now. Like Will's just a
Yeah.
baby still. He's tiny. He's a baby. He like is, obviously he's walking and talking a little bit and gets his own food and things like that. But
Right.
like it's wild. It's just a wild, wild time.
It is. I'm very glad that we are done. Our kids are the oldest out of like our friends groups. Um, so it's nice to be like, okay, well, like our kids are the oldest. We're done. We're gonna be like out of diapers soon. Like we're like gonna be hopefully off of bottles soon.
Yeah.
Not gonna have to worry about traveling with, a huge diaper bag full of random stuff, maybe just an extra pair of clothes, and that's kind of it. Like it's relieving to have that feeling to be like, okay, we're close to the end of like the babiness in quotations of our kids. It's sad to see that go, and we're not going to have that again, but like, man, it's great to have kids that like you can interact with and have thoughts, opinions, ideas on things, and then not have to worry about a brand new newborn and going through it all over again. Like, if hey, people want to do it, you guys want to do it, by all means, go for it. But Kayla and I are like, yeah, it feels good to like be on our way out and then like traveling with our kids and doing that. So we're super excited.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be a
Um,
great, great time. And also terrible at
yeah,
the same time.
exactly. Just being a parent is terrible. It's not terrible, but there's terrible situations that happen while being a parent that is rough. Um, cool. Well, with that, why don't we let these people go?
Let's do it. Let's get out of here. It's Friday. Let the
Let's
people
get
let
outta
the
here.
people be
It's
free.
Friday. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate you. If you haven't already, give us a like, a comment, a subscribe, a rating, a review. All that stuff really helps us out. Um, we are starting 2024 off big, trying to do these more frequently, and then some big things coming soon as well. And thank you so much to Planet Ant for having us on their podcast network.
Go follow us on social media. We're at Big Dad Energy Pod on Facebook and Twitter, at Big Dad Energy Podcast on Instagram and YouTube. Search us on YouTube. Go find us, Big Dad Energy Podcast. First, we put last week's episode up. We're going to put this week's episode up there. We're going to hopefully do some live. Joe and I have been trying to play a 2-player game on a live stream together for a while, so we want to do that. I think we might try It Takes Two or maybe another one.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try and do more of that content this year. The live stream stuff I think is fun. It's easier for us to just be casual and hang out and do it that way. So go follow us on YouTube. That's where we'll be doing it. And find our episodes there too. So thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. Drop us a like, subscribe wherever you find your podcast. I'm Jared Schmansky.
I'm Joe Lopez.
Remember, click your tongues twice before you use them.
This has been a production of Planet Ant Podcast, powered by Pinecast.